high atop the city of Philadelphia on the 52nd floor of the BNY Mellon Bank Center and the Content Club studio in the Pyramid Club of Philadelphia, this is Storytelling with a Purpose. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo, the principal of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. And through this show, I want to illustrate how storytelling with a purpose is integral to my lifelong vocation, storytelling in public relations, with conversations that highlight best practices, tactics, and strategies behind the process, how storytelling works in a professional setting, what goes into it, and how it can move the listener, the viewer, or the reader to some action. Today, Chris Branscome, the CEO of Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer, and I will discuss the communications tools and best practices that go into keeping his organization's audience active and engaged in all their group's events. Storytelling with a purpose describes my way of collaborating with my clients, my colleagues, and my friends to bring to light stories that can connect with an intended audience in a purposeful way, making an emotional connection, capturing heart share that leads to mind share. I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions about what we're talking about here today, or if I can help in any way, or if you'd just like to swap some stories with me. Please feel free to contact me directly by cell phone at 215-266-5943. As mentioned, my guest today is a longtime friend, professional colleague, and sometimes client, Chris Branscome. He has spent more than 25 years working in soccer across the youth, college, and professional levels, and has strong ties to Eastern Pennsylvania as a native son, player, coach, and executive. Branscome joined Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer in 2009 after spending 7 years as the Director of Marketing for U.S. Youth Soccer. As Chief Executive Officer of Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer, Branscome oversees all aspects of youth soccer operation and development in Eastern Pennsylvania. A graduate of Villanova University, where he played soccer for the Wildcats and where we met, Branscome later earned his master's degree at Miami University. He's held various positions in soccer, including Director of Operations for the American Professional Soccer League, General Manager of the Chicago Power, VP of Marketing and Sales for the Philadelphia Kicks. Branscome serves on the advisory boards of PHL Sports, a division of the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Valley Forge Sports Commission. He is also a member of the Philadelphia Task Force on Sports-Based Youth Development, the U.S. Youth Soccer Strategic Planning Committee, and the U.S. Youth Soccer Brand Development Task Force. With the Philadelphia World Cup 2026 Host City Committee, Branscome is actively working with city sports leadership to bring the World Cup games to Philadelphia in 2026. And he is also a member of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Soccer Hall of Fame, although I'm not sure if that has to do with your playing career or your administrative career. Probably a little bit of both.
I'll accept playing career, but I think it was the latter.
Okay.
But it was great to be here. I'm thrilled to do this with you.
Well, we've talked a lot about things over the years. We worked together at Villanova for many years. I met you when you were an undergrad, and I was just a lowly assistant sports information director back in the day. And we've seen a lot of changes in sports. We've seen a lot of changes in technology, communications. But one of the things that I wanted to talk with you today about is how you communicate with your membership and some of the storytelling tools and practices that you put into place to communicate with that audience. The one thing I wanted to clarify with you, it's my understanding that you have well over 100,000 members in Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer throughout the, 13 counties or?
33 counties.
33
we're half the state.
I knew there was a 3.
Yeah, I think it's 33. We cover about 26,000 square miles of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
There is a PA West. But just to briefly answer that, we're the governing body of the sport in the youth capacity. So we are a direct member of U.S. Soccer, who people most commonly know is who runs our national teams.
Sure.
And, we had 2 World Cups in the past, 9 months. And so that's a big part of what we're in that family. But we oversee everything from under 19s and below. Although we're so connected to every other aspect of the sport. Yeah. We have 115,000 registered kids. We're the 5th largest association in the United States.
Wow.
And I'm proud to say that because, we've come back well from COVID.
Sure.
We had a little dip, but we've held our numbers, and we're starting to grow back again. But we also, that's the individual players. We have, at least 20,000 registered coaches, an untold number of volunteers, and about 375 member organizations.
Wow, that's a pretty big clientele, collegial base there that you have to reach out to and keep informed everything along the way. And when you first started at Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer in 2009, one of the things that we were trying to communicate when we started working together on that with you was using the full name, not using the initials.
Yeah.
Because that had become like this acronym of EPYSA, and people didn't really know what that meant or how that played into what you guys were doing every single day. And you really spearheaded that drive to kind of reform the organization, emphasizing Eastern Pennsylvania youth soccer as kind of like the key words in what you guys do. And tell me what some of the challenges that you faced. I know from the experience working with you at that particular period of time, but there were some things that had been kind of like baked in to the process and baked into the organization that you really had to kind of revolutionize the way the organization did their work.
Yeah, well, I think, sports and many organizations over, the last 20, 25 years was that alphabet soup.
Yes.
And, we just celebrated we're in our 52nd year. Our 50th anniversary was in 2022.
Right.
So we've been around a long time. People were aware of us. But the acronym, EPYSA, it's really endemic to our sports and soccer community. The community at large, the sports community, or just everybody in the area didn't know who we were. And I think it was just important. Our name says who we are. It's Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer. It's pretty easy and obvious. Silly things were like getting everyone to say that when they answered the phone.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a mouthful. I said, it's like maybe one or two more syllables. It's not that hard. But history and old habit, people would do that. Of course, our website is still epysa.org, and that's really just kind of an efficient thing. And we've talked about whether we changed it or not, but it's kind of set in people's memories.
Sure.
On their laptops and their phones. It's easy to find us. But it just was a real simple way of communicating. This is exactly what we are, and the footprint that we work in.
It's interesting that you describe that as like answering the phone with the full name and communications back and forth. And that is a funny pattern that people fall into, is like, we're an acronym, we're just going to use the acronym, everyone knows the acronym, and if I have to explain it, well, that'll be the second part of the conversation. But instead of opening with it, kind of acknowledging what it is that you do, that's such an important communication tool that people sometimes overlook. How you answer the phone, how you set up your voicemail, the signature in your emails and things like that. Those are things that people kind of tend to overlook a lot of times. But in communications, if we want to engage in best practices and telling the story of who you are, that's a great place to start it with.
Right, and again, it was a simple thing in my mind.
Yeah.
And I had experienced that when I was at U.S. Youth Soccer. They had been known as, USYS, USYSA, all these different things. But again, in that alphabet soup, and especially on the national level, people, we need to break through. Right? What makes us different and makes people understand who we are and what we do. I think that made a big difference, even as I would go out in my job there to try to talk to people around the country. Whether it's to try to attract sponsorships, it's strategic partners. Even when I would say it's Chris Branscome from U.S. Youth Soccer, they would understand that. If I said it's Chris from USYSA, could you say that again, please?
Yeah.
So, and even at that, I would sometimes in that job would say United States Youth Soccer.
Okay.
It also would lend a level of gravitas to who we were.
Sure.
But U.S. can be in front of so many companies. We literally were, the governing body of youth soccer, for the United States, representing our United States Soccer Federation. So But we've seen that in so many other companies
Sure.
in their branding initiatives over the last 20 years, making sure. When I was at St. Joe's about 20-some years ago, and I was working with the great Joe Lenardi, he was leading that rebranding of the university, and he really wanted to make it St. Joseph's.
Right.
Because there's so many St. Joseph's, St. Joe's out there. Yeah, I think we saw that, it was endearing to this city and this community, you know who St. Joe's is.
Right.
But people around the country would make that mistake. And famously, Phil Martelli shot back at one of the announcers during a game, we're not St. Joseph's of Pennsylvania. We're just St. Joe's, The other St. Joe's is a small Division III school. They're not even playing here, right? So, so I think that, again, it just becomes an important aspect of trying to tell people who you are and what you believe in yourself and your organization.
And I think, again, you're telling people who you are. Again, that's storytelling. And it's storytelling with a purpose. You're trying to explain to people who you are and what you do. And
it's a story with a bad title can really set you off.
Exactly. It can opens you up to all kinds of criticism and questions. My wife works in an industry where acronyms are rife and trade names and other things on process. And she'll start telling me about what she did at work today. And all these acronyms are being thrown out. And I will stop her and say, what does that stand for again? Because she may have told me 3 or 4 times, but I'm a layman when it comes to what she does. And I think a lot of us get so siloed in our particular industry or our particular company that we don't recognize that layman aspect of the world out there when we're trying to explain who we are, even if it's with a related soccer or sports organization that we're communicating to. We still need to kind of educate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think industry jargon can really derail you when you're talking to the public. And so in our world, we're dealing with a lot of families.
Sure.
They may not be sports families. The parents may not be former athletes or current athletes. So you have to really make sure they understand what you're talking about. And if you use the inside, language, like if you and I were sitting talking to a couple of scientists or doctors and they're speaking in, medical terms and in Latin and things like, we have no idea.
Absolutely.
Maybe they want it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. But we don't. We want to make sure it's very clear to our families, our kids, and we lean heavily on that. We do coaching education. That's one of the things that we do.
Sure.
Is to make sure that, we are educating the people who are going to, work with your kids. And it's a very professional program that has been developed over, 50 years with U.S. Soccer, et cetera. But we very specifically tell those novice coaches that don't use jargon with the kids.
Right.
Keep it simple. And that translates when they're talking to the parents. And again, it's a family aspect of what we do because you're going to spend so much time with your team. I mean, it's a year-round thing anymore, no matter what the sport is.
Yeah.
So, we want you to be comfortable and be with us for many years. And even that, when that translates, as we were talking earlier today, about becoming a fan. Right?
Sure.
And, you want to understand the sport that you're a fan of. And, sometimes when the jargon comes out, somebody wants to sound important. But if we're trying to teach the sport and grow the sport, let's keep it simple.
I've been a baseball fan and a baseball statistician and things for years. I still have trouble with OPS. I still have trouble with some of these other new categories of statistics that are used every day now. And I go, can we just get back to okay, Kyle Schwarber has 45 home runs and he's driven 100, 120.
It's an RBI, not RBI.
Yeah,
just to be clear, right?
He's got 120 bases on balls. He's walked 120 times, in other words. Go back to the old Moneyball. He gets on base. Do I care how he does it? But it's funny how jargon, and we use the term inside baseball so freely now in applying to other things. But there is that aspect of jargon and acronyms being difficult for the layman to pick up and to kind of really understand what's going on.
Right. Yeah. And again, we really want to make sure it's simple, that people understand what we're talking about it, whenever we're talking about it. And I think that allows people to be part of it quicker, that they don't feel like, again, they're not the insider. We want to be more inclusive so that let's speak some regular language with everybody.
Sure.
So there are specific terms to our sport, like any sport, but they're easy to learn.
Yeah.
We don't want to make you feel silly or that you just don't know it. We'll teach it to you.
And you're very friendly about that, and you're very open about that. And I think that's one of the things that attracts people to your group. When we first started working together on this in this aspect back in 2009, when you came back to Philly to work with Eastern Pennsylvania Youth Soccer, you kind of overhauled a lot of different things as far as like the magazine that comes out, and this is one of the issues that I worked on with you, but it was newsprint copy on the cover, and it was it was tactile, but it was also kind of like throwaway. And you, one of the things that you did was make it more of a keepsake, and you know, I'm going to have this in my house for a while. And then we worked on revising the email program and the communications that come out from you, and really doing a lot of integrated marketing with email and opening up a lot of different channels and redeveloping the website. You've done that a couple times, and using that as a communications tool. And the last time we worked together was right at the beginning stages of COVID, and we were trying to transition everything from tactile hard copy and things like that to something that they could get online at a moment's notice to try to keep people informed during the pandemic. And obviously, youth soccer is one of those areas that was touched on by the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns, because there were a lot of games were canceled and a lot of activities were canceled, and you were restricted to what you could do outdoors and what you could do indoors. So that impacted the organization's activities, at least in 2020. But one of the things that also accelerated was the changes in the way we communicate with our constituents. I wonder if you have gone back to some older techniques, or have you embraced some different techniques, or are you doing a kind of a mix of things? Because one of the things I think is interesting, Chris, is that the storytelling doesn't change. It's the form in which we tell the story. And I think, you know, whether it's a print magazine, whether it's an email newsletter, whether it's a TikTok video, once we get the story developed, we can tell it in a lot of different ways. But what are some of the things that you've seen change for your organization since 2020?
Well, yeah, you hinted on a lot of them, and we've had to use every platform available to us to make sure that we're staying current with the information, especially during the pandemic, to make sure that people were aware of how we were going to come back. And again, multiple constituencies. So we have parents, we have administrators, we have coaches. And during that period specifically, we were really making sure we're talking to the adults.
Right.
So when we were coming out of things, and we were still, like, we couldn't print, right? The printing business was shut down.
Sure.
Right. You couldn't get into to the mills for the paper, and they couldn't get to the shops to run the presses. But that's when we did our comeback. We did a full digital version of this Touchline magazine, which has been, we've been doing that for approximately 30 years or so.
Sure.
And we had continued to enhance that and try to make it look newsstand quality and give a lot of good information to people. So it'd be an advertising opportunity for our sponsors. We're partners with the Philadelphia Union. Their people are in there too. But we also want to make sure now, let's talk to the kids, right? We kind of drifted from that because we were really trying to, again, educate and inform the parents. And even on some of the soccer-related issues, we were a little probably heavy on talking to the adults about what you need to do to make this a good opportunity for all the kids. And we had like coaching information, and certain stories were maybe a little too adult-oriented. So when we were coming back, we wanted to start moving more to some kids' themes, and not just like games and mazes and word searches. We just wanted to speak down to them. I shouldn't say speak down to them, speak directly to them. In that we looked at things you might see in other magazines, like kids magazines.
Sure.
And, I have to give credit where it's due, is picking my daughter up from college, bringing her home, and she's an advertising and PR major at Penn State. And she's a senior now, so she'll be looking for a job soon, everybody. And she said, Dad, I had some ideas. You guys really need to look at the same things you'd see in the teen magazines, the stuff that Tiger Beat and those kind of things, right?
I think that might be a little dated reference for both of us.
But she starts talking about what's in the bag, right? So what are kids carrying in their bag to games versus what the pros are carrying in their bags or keeping, right? What's the greatest, latest in equipment? Why do kids or the pros like certain shoes or like People Magazine kind of stuff, who wore it best, and they show the uniforms of one club to another. And it was really kind of a creative way to tie the whole soccer community, professional, college, youth, and make it more relatable, right?
Yeah, I like that.
It was a segment of tweets. Here's what the U.S. women's national team. Here's what Rose Lavelle is a big person on Twitter or X, and very funny and interesting, and just like what she's saying, and then maybe some things that other people in soccer say. So we kind of went with some of Katie's suggestions, and when we came out with our first printed magazine coming out of COVID, I believe that was in 22. We really wanted to let's bring it all. And we really changed the focus and the direction of it. But we still cannot forget all the other platforms, right? So you mentioned Twitter. So, one of our staff members, in charge of marketing, Kelsey, she's great with that. She's really focused on Twitter at our live events. The kids eat it up. They love that. And we get some of our higher views from the things we do on TikTok. I said Twitter, I meant TikTok. Because they can express themselves, they can have fun, right? Twitter's a good place for some things, but TikTok is a completely different thing.
And that's where I hesitate to make myself sound old, but that's where the kids are today.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I'm not, a daily user of certain aspects of social media, but what is coming up, behind us, what the next generations are using it, they're heavy on social media. But I still remind our staff, even with social media, they're all different and they all look at different constituencies. So, TikTok trends younger, Instagram trends younger, Facebook is a little older. That's maybe more the parents. LinkedIn is the more business related one. So we need to spread what we do across all the platforms, plus make sure the website is current. And I would say, do not forget websites. And I think there's sometimes people forget, because they're so socially motivated by social media, they forget the website's still the anchor.
Yes.
That's where everything's going to live.
Exactly. I think that's a very key point, and that's something that I've been very cognizant of. And in fact, I'm working with my colleagues here at SBX on tweaking my website a little bit. And I like to look at that as my home base, my always open sign. I can do things on Twitter, I can do things on LinkedIn, I can do things on Facebook, and I can do things on Instagram. But coming back to the base is where, for me, the website is my home, and all those other things grow out of there. But the other aspect of that, Chris, that I want to go back to is the storytelling. Because once you develop a story idea, and once you've got something good that you want to tell, you can adapt that story to those different platforms. Yeah. You don't have to have separate stories for each platform. You can have one story that you can, one united messaging topic that you can tell across all these different platforms without sacrificing the quality of that original story.
Right, so there's different techniques you can use to make sure you're hitting all those platforms, and that we have 115,000 players. That's at least 115,000 stories if we want it, right? Right. So there's a lot of things for us to tell, different aspects of their soccer lives and soccer careers and what's going on within the business. But, which social media platform may be the best to lead off with, and then link it back to the website. Simple things. For more, go here. Or again, I mentioned Kelsey Teeple, who's our marketing director. She's a big proponent of using QR codes. Okay. So something that's changed since we worked on our printed magazine together. We use QR codes all the time because we want to pull people back to the website to learn more about this subject or just see more about what we do. And even further, during the World Cups, both the men's and women's this past year, we did some advertising. You know, a lot of it was branding and awareness is the reason we did it. But as you might see more and more, we're not exactly the cutting edge on this, but we have QR codes on those ads. And fortunately, during the Women's World Cup final in August, we got a lot of play on the streaming channels.
Okay.
As part of where we advertised, we spread it with Fox through on-air cable.
That's
and
wonderful.
Streaming. And so there was multiple times where that QR code was there that people could have got their cameras out and learned more about what we do and where we are.
Yeah, that's a wonderful use of that technology, too, because it really is. It's you and I go back so many years. I mean, I was working on an IBM Selectric typewriter, writing copy, revising it, retyping it, doing layouts on white 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper where I would draw what I wanted to go on that page and handing that to the printer and saying, here's the copy, here's the art, here's the layout, run with it. And now we've seen that industry change, and we've seen our techniques change to the point where we can basically create the layout. We can basically design the page. We can do all these different things with all the tools that we have available. Plus, we can do different versions of it for different technology. But the basic platform on which we build these things is stories. And for you and I, we're trying to tell good stories. You're trying to tell good stories about the kids that are playing, the coaches that are coaching them, the teams that they're on. We want to tell the positive, happy stories that will inspire people. We don't want to get involved with crisis communications, and we don't want to be involved with the bad news. You know, we don't want to be when a building blows up and being the spokesperson for that. We like to tell the happy stories, and there's so many happy stories in youth soccer and in the world of the sport. But that basic principle of telling a good story starts with the good story, and then all these other tools that we have in our toolbox, or arrows in our quiver, whether it be X, whether it be TikTok. I haven't experimented with TikTok yet. I'm a little loath to go there, but you know, I have played with everything else except for MySpace.
I'm not sure I want to see you dance either.
Yeah, well, you know, I can twinkle my toes a little bit, but I don't think I'm not going to be a popular viral video. I don't think. Anyway.
But I think. Even as you're just saying, what we in the communication side, we rather tell the happy stories, the good stories, and shine a light on people for the great things they've done. But we do have to take those other paths, and things don't always go our way.
Especially like we talked about COVID being a case in point. You're one of the organizations that was most impacted by that because you were not allowed to have organized events. You were not allowed to have meetings with the coaches. You were not allowed to have people in the office. All these different things kind of impacted your daily activities.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, again, kind of my background and so the style of writing that I would do when I would put these things together myself, I tend to do that. I tend to try to tell a story when sometimes people want, just give me the bullet points. This is an important memo. It just should be A, B, and C. Right, but I want to give people something that they're going to want to read, and they understand that I understand what they're going through. So I mean, I have some, critics within the office like you should just be, bullet pointed. And there's times when that is absolutely correct, but depending on the subject matter, especially the seriousness of it, I want to lure them in a little bit and let them know that I really understand what they're going through.
Sure.
And this becomes something of value to them.
So it's authentic, too, because it's coming from you, and you're taking the time to write it and tell the story, and you're not just throwing bullet points at them. You're not just throwing words and phrases and infographics and things like that. You're you're giving testimony, if you will.
And we sometimes, this is a technique that many people will do anyway. You want that sandwich effect, good and then the tough part and then the good wrapped around it again. And I tend to do that. It's, again, I want to say, hi, how are you doing? I hope things are well.
Yep.
We're going through some tough times, but, we're going to get through it. And that's the way I kind of went through the COVID process.
You don't want to be Eeyore all the time.
No, because look, we got to come through it. But I think I'll still do that today, and we're out of that part of the world. But there's still other tough issues that face us. And we have a lot of troubles with referees and
Sure.
a lot of sideline behavior. That's one of the biggest menaces to all of youth sports is sideline behavior, and people attack referees, or they say a lot of negative things from the sideline to the kids. Look,
Sure.
Bryce Harper can take it, but a 10-year-old can't and shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that? So just being a blunt object and saying don't do this or else, and you'll face fines and repercussions and discipline. Let's try to help people understand why this is bad, right? What happens to these children as they hear these things, and unfortunately, what could happen to you if you are the person doing it.
Right.
So let's appeal to their better nature, and that there's a nicer way, a better way of doing things, and that's what's better for the sport and for the kids. But if I just feel like if I hit those bullet points, don't do this, don't do that, he's not talking to me, or I
Right.
don't need someone to preach at me. So I hope that style that I go for does make a difference, that people are paying attention when they look at it and decide to read it.
I think that makes sense. And it's another storytelling idea that I've had over the years is when I'm trying to, when I have writer's block, or when I have kind of like a moment where I can't really get my arms around what I want to do with a story, I fall back on pretend you're writing a holiday letter to the family, like Merry Christmas from Jim. Here's what we did this year, or this is what's going on around our house, that kind of thing. And when I hit on that a couple years ago, it all of a sudden made sense to me. Like, okay, I'm going to try to tell the story as I would if I were writing a holiday letter, and then kind of pull back from that and say, okay, what parts of that really work? What parts of that can I drop? And kind of edit it down that way. But I think, again, not relying solely on the bullet, because you can then pull the bullet points out of what you've written. You can kind of find those core messages that you can use in an X post, or you can use in Instagram or something like that. If you need to kind of further tell that story to those other platforms, you can get it down to 280 characters or whatever it is these days.
Well, and I think as far as being a storyteller or a writer of corporate memos, that you still have to get a point across, and we as a different generation lament that the younger generation is only writing in so many characters.
Sure. Right?
Or the even what they're teaching in school, or like grammar.
Yeah.
And things of that nature. It's changed, right? So how will the next generation communicate? I'm not entirely sure. But
well, if Elon has his way, we'll have chips in our heads, and we'll be able to do it that way.
Well, that's for another podcast for sure. But yeah, I think it's just, and again, I have a lot of young people that work in our office, have lots of interns that come through. We deal in a youth space, and I would love for that to be part of the educational process, that
Sure.
you learn the things that not that old, right? 'Cause
Right.
we're not that old, but things that we were doing 20 years ago or 50 years ago. Some of that still applies, is still acceptable, and still the basis of what you're doing. Just maybe your language has changed, the jargon's changed, or the tools have changed.
Sure.
Right? So we're not using the typewriters anymore, or all the ways we lay out a magazine with clear Scotch tape and
taking
taking
a
clips
photocopy.
Right. Yeah. Now you can create it all on your own, or the fact that the technology keeps improving, that younger kids are learning how to do these things with the software that's available for free.
Exactly.
Right? It's off the internet. So look, a great graphic designer can be priceless, but Canva's out there.
Yes.
Right? And so I see a lot of young people, they've got this tool. They may not have the creative eye, right?
But they can see the template there and say, okay, I can work with that.
Yeah. And so again, it's still the art that goes along with the science of communication and marketing. Some people have the right sense of what looks good and what doesn't, And of course, we have different people for all those roles. So the person that creates the content right, and is writing the words may not know the best way to visually present that. And I think that's all the things in a mix for a young person trying to come out in today's communications world. And again, I'm still learning things. Like I said, my daughter taught me things. Kelsey, other people in our office, other young people with other businesses. That's how I stay current.
Right.
I'm not necessarily learning from any trade magazines or trade websites.
Right.
It's seeing what young people are doing, and that's also the key to us dealing with young people. That's the trends that we need to use to get their attention.
Find the audience where they are and use use the techniques that they're familiar with or that they appreciate. I think one of the things that's funny about that is, and you mentioned it, content creators. We're here in the Content Club studio at the Pyramid Club. Content is what we used to call a story. Content was what we used to call a photograph. Mm-hmm. Content is even what we used to call a blog these days. Content seems to be like the core messaging tool that we're all working towards now. We're creating content for different audiences. We're creating content for different viewers, listeners, readers. One of the things that I've always tried to do, and this is going to date me a little bit, but when I would go into a client's office for the first time back in like 97, 98, 99, 2000, I would look to see what kind of magazines they had in the waiting room. And if they were on the label as the subscriber, okay, we know that so-and-so reads Touchline, so-and-so reads Time, so-and-so reads the Wall Street Journal. We don't have that anymore, especially post-COVID. Mm-hmm. Have you been in a waiting room lately and even seen a magazine? Even at the doctors, they're not there anymore. But finding out what they like to read, what they like to watch, where they get their news, where they get their information, and if they have an affinity for X or what we used to call Twitter, okay, how can we create messages on your behalf that resonate with the Twitter audience? How can we create messages that will resonate and have an impact on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, TikTok? Again, I mentioned I didn't do TikTok, but that sounds like a pejorative. I don't do TikTok.
Well, it's funny. You started off earlier. You were talking about the jargon of baseball and the analytics, right?
Yeah.
So analytics is driving so much of sport these days, and isn't that same thing happening in our world?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Because that what should be our content, right? And whether you're getting your content, which by the way, content's king, but print's dead. I'm not sure, right? But the information, right, that people get their news from, I still get the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Yeah.
So,
which is more of a pamphlet these days than a newspaper.
But that's where I get my news, or the news channels. I still do that. I do look at some of the websites, but younger people, in whatever age group you want to put in that category, right? They're getting their news feeds,
yes.
Right? So they're choosing where they get it from, and then the algorithm starts deciding based on what they click on and what they continue,
what other stories
they're going to be
fed.
Yep. So they're being fed their news, and I found time and time again that a certain age of people does not know what's happening broadly in the world.
Because they haven't seen anything outside of that algorithm.
Right, and they see that, those one or two aspects of it, which, not to get political, but that's the way, the campaigns went.
Absolutely.
Over the last two elections. And so that's the flavor of the day. And, even things I'm watching this morning about, AI is, kind of stealing from authors to create, AI-generated, stories. And partly why all the writers are on strike in Hollywood, because their words are being taken by some machine, so to speak.
And repurposed.
Right. So, I think that's just this other aspect that, to stay on top of and learn. I still wish, real people would write the words.
Yep.
But that's just how we know the world has gone, and I don't see that we're changing from that anytime soon.
I think content is king, but I think authenticity is the ruler overall. in these processes. And with AI, you're not going to have that authenticity. But that's my belief right now. I'm not sure I would change my belief, but if something changes my belief, I'll certainly let you know. But one of the things that we've touched on here, and I kind of want to wrap up with this, is that, you know, the content, the storytelling, the positive stories for heart share as well as mind share, that's still going to be something that we strive towards every day in our professional and social life. But what kinds of media do you watch that inspire you, or that you say, I want to emulate that? For me, I always use the example that when I was a kid, I watched Johnny Carson religiously. And I can see in some of the things that I do when I'm making an appearance, or when I'm even doing this, I try to emulate some of the things that I saw him do on camera, and saw some of the things that I saw him do when I was growing up, and he was such an influence on me. And when I talk to my clients about how do they want to present themselves, how do they want to look on camera, how do they want to sound on audio, how do they want to look and sound on a podcast, is there somebody that you look at on TV or you see in the media that you say, because I would tell people, go look at Fox News, go look at CNN, go look at on Bloomberg, and see how these people that are on all day long commenting on these different issues, how they present themselves, and say, gee, I'd like to be like that, or I'm not going to be like that. Is there somebody like that you look at, or you tell people to emulate, or
That's a
say,
great
take
question.
a look at that?
I don't know that I have any one
Okay.
person. Probably, again, as growing up as a kid who played all sports and watched everything, you know, a wide variety of sportscasters, or, you know, even people that you just watched regularly, like, you know, Jim Gardner just retires. Sure. Like, who didn't watch him over the last 30 years? Or just newscasters we grew up with. You know, I mean, I still remember John Facenda doing
Sure.
NFL films, so that voice is in my head. But I think, again, I'm kind of late to joining the podcast world, not just being my first appearance on one today, but even listening to them. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of one, because in my business, you know, I listen to one, Peter Crouch.
Okay.
Very famous player in England. He's known for being, you know, 6'7" and played for the national team, but he's funny. But he's very authentic, and he tells stories about his time as a player and even now as a pundit. And I think that's, you know, I just really enjoyed that, you know, as something in terms of entertainment.
Sure.
And you know, I want to joke, and when we sign off and say, I'm Travis and you're Jason, thank you for watching New Heights. You know, I haven't got onto that, but I hear it's great. My wife listens to that one.
That's funny.
And so I think it's just, you know, even adjusting to the medium that we're in. And so, yeah, I'll think about that when after we leave, like who have I ever tried to, but again, it's probably an amalgamation of all these different people I've worked with and for over time, and how I've watched them at a microphone in front of a crowd, or dealing with, you know, big groups, small groups. Right. You know, and cameras or no cameras. And
even in your writing, I know that I emulate certain authors that I like, or certain styles of writing that I like. Right now, I'm in the middle of reading James Ellroy's latest book, and I love the short, punchy sentences and the alliteration and the staccato style of his writing. And I think of David Mamet, and his writing is kind of staccato, but also with, you know, iambic pentameter and things like that. So I always tell people that they can learn from some of the best people out there. Those resources are out there, and you can kind of take the good and see the bad and see what you want to incorporate into your own storytelling techniques.
Of which I always, when I speak to students, and I try to mentor students back at Villanova and some other places, I was an English major when I was in college.
Yep.
And I always tell them it's because, you know, I learned to read, write well, critical thinking, you know, creativity, right? And those are things I think that really have helped me immensely, you know, because as you say, David Mamet, I know exactly what you mean, you know, or an Aaron Sorkin style.
Right.
I know what you mean. And those are like, you know, plays or stories that I follow. And, you know, that rat-a-tat of Glengarry Glen Ross is always, I know what I'm watching.
It's a touchstone, yeah.
You know, But yeah, I think that's happened to me too over time. Is all those different writers. You know, when I'm poorly writing, I think I'm now in a stream of consciousness, and you know,
You're a Kerouac all of a
yeah,
sudden.
like you know, that doesn't apply to when I'm writing, you know, again, corporate memos or official business type of things. But it's always my excuse when I have writer's block.
Yep.
So,
As a fellow Villanova English major and with a bachelor's degree in English, I empathize, I sympathize, and I identify with that. I really do. And I think we neglect a lot of the things that liberal arts education can do for you. But that would be a topic for another day, perhaps. So, Chris, I really want to thank you for doing this today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope we can continue the conversation. And I hope you guys who are listening and watching, if you want to continue the conversation, get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to continue the dialogue. We'll see you all again very, very soon.